Hey, this is Owen. If you're comfortable, leave your first name and state at the sound of the tiny truck backing up.
Hi, I'm Liv from Minnesota. I have another question for you. So, if a Jehovah's Witnesses get dementia, well, you know how dementia works, so we're gonna forget everything. But if they can't remember anything, are they still technically considered a Jehovah's Witness, or are they gonna be saved from quote unquote Armageddon? I don't know. I just thought that would be a really weird loophole to be answered. All right. Have a good day.
I appreciate the voicemail. There is kind of a loophole in Jehovah's Witness theology that basically says it's the condition of your heart that really matters. If you're a good person in your heart, then you'll make it through Armageddon, or you'll be resurrected in the new system, or whatever else. Some Jehovah's Witnesses use that loophole to say they can basically be outside the religion if they want and still get into the new system. You don't have to be like an active baptized member to make it through. Jehovah will look at your heart condition and determine if you should make it through based on that. The governing body has shot that idea down thoroughly, and they said if you aren't an active, baptized, door knocking Jehovah's Witness, you won't make it through Armageddon. You have to be knocking on doors up to the bitter end. And if you don't save somebody because you just didn't feel like going out that day or something, if you miss the opportunity to bring someone into the religion, Jehovah will view you as blood guilty for that, which means basically you murdered them. That's pretty much the view that the governing body takes. So they're a lot more rigid with it than they are culturally, like than some of the people are culturally. But for the most part, that loophole does still exist for certain people, like people with dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever else. It's kind of a cultural thing that changes from person to person, but for the most part, they check the heart condition.
Well, and as far as sheep and goats go, to my knowledge, after I worked on a couple of ranches and grew up on a farm, and goats are the only livestock that I know of that actually piss in their own faces to attract their own kind.
That is an interesting fun fact. That fact was extremely fun. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I assume what you're referencing is the fact that Greg Locke is obsessed with not being a sheep, which, of course, in the Christian dichotomy means, by default, he's a goat. So I guess goats are supposed to be a bad thing. Like, being a goat's a bad thing in the view of Christianity, but Greg Locke somehow identifies with that, doesn't want to be considered a sheep. Bizarrely, kind of contradicts everything the Bible says about sheep, right? But we knew he didn't follow the Bible for a long time leading up to this. So anyway, thank you for that fun fact. I appreciate that very much.
Hi, Owen. I was just wondering why it is that Jehovah's Witnesses have a problem with getting blood transfusions, but they're okay with getting organ transplants. I just kind of don't understand why one is okay and the other one isn't. Thanks. Bye.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Jehovah's Witnesses have actually been getting a lot of pushback on the blood transfusion thing. Like, for decades, for a very, very long time, they've been getting pushback on this from all different sides, not just secular sources, not just ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, but even within the religion. People have been pushing back on this and saying this is ridiculous, you misinterpreted what the Bible said, so on and so forth. So the governing body doesn't feel comfortable with completely reversing the policy because that would make them look like fools. I think they feel that they have to hold their ground on this, or they will reveal that they really don't know what they're talking about, and they really aren't in communication with God, as they claim to be. So they can't just straight up reverse the whole thing, but they say, as time goes on, as science improves, as we understand how things work more and more, we allow people to take fractions of blood. Like, for example, there are medications that are designed using blood, but it's only a blood fraction, like plasma, for example, or some other piece of blood, antibodies, things like that. Things that were like extracted from blood. So they've given up a little bit of ground in that area. They're okay with Jehovah's Witnesses taking certain fractions of blood, but they do draw a hard red line down at taking a blood transfusion or certain specific fractions you can't use. Let me correct one thing, though. I don't think that they're necessarily okay with it. I feel like that may have been the wrong word to use. They say it's a conscience matter, which means Jehovah may or may not be okay with you doing this. We don't know. We have no idea. So if you feel comfortable risking your everlasting life by taking a blood transfusion, risking the possibility that Jehovah will be really pissed off at you for taking it, go ahead. We're not going to stop you. And it's kind of the same angle they take with organ donations or organ transplants or whatever. If you feel comfortable enough that Jehovah's okay with this, that you're willing to do it, then go ahead and do it. But there's a possibility that Jehovah will be really pissed at you and you're going to die and never be resurrected for it. That's the angle that they take. This is a patently absurd position to hold, and it gets people killed. The anti-blood transfusion take that they have. But they can't back off of it, or they feel people will view them as fools who didn't know what they were talking about in the first place. Little do they know, people already view them that way, so.
Hi, Owen. This is Ray from Canada. I had a funny thought about the apocalypse that people keep talking about it with the religion stuff. Like, imagine if the whole revelation or whatever already happened and, you know, we're just still waiting for it to happen when it already has. And it's just kind of, I don't know, it seems really kind of like a silly thought. Anyways, love your show. Bye.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Really interesting. Actually, Jehovah's Witnesses kind of view it that way in some ways. They continued to make prediction after prediction, end times prediction after end times prediction for centuries. I mean, they've been doing it since the 1870s. They made predictions all through the 1870s, the 1880s, the 1890s, the early 1900s, and then the 1910s, and then the 1920s. And by the 1920s, they realized, you know, this is probably a bad idea. Maybe we should stop setting dates. They set so many of them, believing that the end was here and Armageddon was going to take place, that finally they had to say, Armageddon took place. You just weren't there to see it, or you just didn't notice it. Jesus actually did come back invisibly in 1914. That was their last prophecy at the time that they came up with this. Your proposition that you had, a lot of other religions have had that proposition too. The Millerite Church in the mid-1800s, I think 1843, they set a hard date for 1843 also, and it failed miserably. And after it failed so hard, it split off into different factions. There was the group that believed something really did happen. Jesus came back invisibly. Then there was the group that believed this Bible math bullshit was ridiculous and we shouldn't be taking it seriously at all. And then there was the faction that believed the Bible math was true, but they needed to get the right variables. They felt like they were miscalculating it, basically. So those three factions split off from the Millerite Church, and the group that believed that the Bible math was legitimate, but they had the variables wrong, that's actually the one that Jehovah's Witnesses spawned from. And it's also, as a matter of fact, the same faction that Seventh-day Adventists spawned from. Ellen G. White, the creator of Seventh-day Adventists, she and the creator of the Jehovah's Witness religion, Charles Taze Russell, they knew each other. They went to the same church for a while. How about that shit, right? In the late 1800s. That is fucking nutty. So anyways, that's kind of a little bit of a short history of end times predictions and the Bible math involved. The proposition you're giving us, that's been formulated and toyed around with by a bunch of different end times pastors. And honestly, I just think the idea of an end coming abruptly like the Bible prophesies, I think it's ridiculous in the first place. So anyway, thank you for the voicemail. I appreciate that. First email's from Betsy. Hi, found your YouTube channel podcast recently, and I really like what you do. Keep up the good work. Appreciate that. My question is, how are we supposed to hold people in power accountable when they claim God told them to do X, or they prayed all day so they must do Y? Examples, Oklahoma governor still pardoning Julius Jones after prayer, and Michelle Bachmann claims that God told her to run again. Kim Davis is another example that comes to mind. Does this not go against the bootstraps argument and personal responsibility mantra that they have? Thanks. Betsy in Minnesota. Yes, it does, but something that I've noticed recently is that principles and values mean absolutely nothing to these people. What matters in their mind is hurting the other, is an us versus them mentality. Hating the person that they're opposed to, hating their enemies, owning the libs. That's what matters. And nothing else. Nothing else. When you realize that's where they're coming from, every other decision that they make starts to make sense. As far as holding them accountable goes, I think what we have to do is come out here and put it on blast. We have to keep putting it up here. And we have to keep calling it out and talking about how ridiculous it is. And if possible, go back in their history of the things that they've said and find the inconsistencies and put them up right on screen for everybody to see. Talk about all of the ridiculous things that they've brought up and claimed and point out how they never came true. Like I said, though, everything they do goes right back to owning the libs. That's the angle that they take with everything. When you realize that, you can use it as something of a predictive tool to figure out what their next steps are probably going to be. Hello, this is Jeremy B. from Austin, Texas. I started listening to your show back at the beginning of the pandemic. Your podcast is awesome. Thank you. Keep up the good work. I'm a lifelong atheist. I was born into a Jewish family, but never was a believer. Anyway, I wanted to know what you thought about atheists in the pulpits, pews, and in political power who claim to be religious, Christian in particular, but are actually atheists. If we can have people like Trump, who's most likely an atheist, in political power, but are normally Christian, causing so much harm to the country, what does it mean or say about atheists in general? The same goes for religious leaders. They have so much power and influence and seem to be so deceitful, seem to be scammers and saying such outlandish things. Do they truly believe? Is it just for political or religious power and money? To put this more plainly, if we have a person in power, or not so powerful, religious and or political position, causing harm to this country or society, but they appear to be scammers, if they are in fact just claiming to be Christians, but not really believers at all, where does that leave atheism? That's an interesting question. Here's where it leaves atheism. Atheism is nothing more than a position on the question of whether or not God exists. Being an atheist doesn't describe anything else about you as a person. Now, there are atheist communities, like on YouTube, or groups of people who meet in like college campuses, social clubs, things like that. There are atheist groups that meet, and a lot of the time they have similar moral value systems, and they have similar political beliefs and ideals and all that other stuff. But atheism in general is nothing more than a position on whether God exists. If you don't believe that God exists, then you're an atheist. And in my opinion, Trump is an atheist. You can have good moral values or bad moral values, and that's where we see a lot of these people coming from. Like, for example, Trump. He has little to no moral values, and thus has no problem with scamming religious people out of their money. I think you should get more specific with what you mean when you say atheism. Are you talking about specific communities? I denounce Trump and anything that dude has to say or do, period. But I am an atheist. I don't denounce the position of not accepting that a God exists. If I want to build a community around me of good moral atheists, fellow good moral atheists, then I can do that. And if somebody tries to start scamming the group or doing some scumbag thing, I can kick them out of the group. We just don't have to have them around anymore. You have to form the group into what you want it to be. Atheism as a general concept is nothing more than a lack of belief in God. This next email is from Samuel. I read part of his email last week, but I'm getting to another question this time. My question is, do you have any advice for aspiring creators looking to make educational and or cultural content? Also, do you have any book recommendations for people interested in religious studies? I would normally recommend like Richard Dawkins and some other people, but Dawkins got himself in some hot water for some really fucked up stuff he did recently, so I feel like I can't really recommend his books anymore. But there are a lot of books out there about religions. Check out Bart Ehrman. He's got an interesting set of books on the historicity of Jesus and things like that. Actually, that specific book titled The Historicity of Jesus, I think that's a Richard Carrier book, and to my knowledge, they do not like each other. So let me rephrase. Bart Ehrman has a bunch of books on the history of Jesus. We'll say that. But as far as aspiring creators go and any advice I may have for people trying to get into that field, my main point of advice, I have two pieces of advice. If you can take these two pieces, then you'll have the best chance of success. Number one, set a schedule and stick to it no matter what. Rain, sun, doesn't matter. Do it. You stick to the schedule and don't give it up for absolutely anything. If you intend to do a video a week, do a video a week. 2 videos a week, then do 2 videos a week. Exact same day, exact same hour, exact same minute. You should have that thing ready to release at the exact same time so that your listeners know to expect it and so that you can set deadlines for yourself. Piece of advice number 2, get a good microphone. No, doesn't matter if you're doing YouTube or TikTok or podcasting or anything else. Get a good microphone. A microphone is everything in this industry. People won't listen to you unless they can hear you clearly. That's one thing that took me a while to learn. You have to have a good microphone. So those are my 2 pieces of advice. Don't stop for anything. Stick to a schedule and get a good microphone. Hopefully that answered your question. Quick reminder, if you want to watch me live stream, I do it every Sunday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the Telltale Fireside Chat channel. If you want to watch me stream next week, I'll be doing it the 19th, I believe, of December, and the 20th of December. I'm doing 2 streams back-to-back, Sunday night, Monday night, for Christmas, because I'm going to take the week of Christmas off.